Hi there. Continuing with books on Britain's armed police, we come to really one of the most informative and interesting books on the subject because it's written from the inside by arguably the most experienced police firearms officer in the country. And this is Lethal Force by Tony Long, who served 33 years in the police, including 25 in the firearms units. He was already interested in shooting and outdoors and was a member of a pistol club during his early police service, and he went into the Special Patrol Group, the SPG, which was the public order unit, involved in lots and lots of heavy action, Brixton riots and so on, all described in full detail, along with all the banter, etc. Rather, in one of the previous books about Manchester with the Tactical Aid Group, it's very much that type of unit. While in SPG, he goes through firearms training, which at that time was run by D11, who were the firearms instructors. So he goes along, and straight away the material, they were emphasizing what they call sense of direction shooting, whereas Tony was proficient in aim shooting and was getting perfect scores, and the instructors were kind of criticizing him for this, and he passed the course with the top score. But he was lucky because in some forces, the jealousy of the firearms instructors and the way they clung to the doing it by the book would have hampered him. I know of a couple of cases in Merseyside. One was a chap, I'll call Spud, who was a very, very keen shooter, shot in practical competitions. I've shot alongside him many times. He was an excellent shooter. He took the firearms training, and the other guys on the course used to cluster around him and ask him questions, get him to show them how to do stuff rather than the instructors, and they just failed him. And it was no more than that kind of jealousy and keeping to the strict way of doing it, so dog in the manger type of thing. Anyway, so he becomes an authorised shot, and then decides he wants to make that his career and joins D11, which was split between instructional duties, and they also had an operational remit, and he joined Blue Team. So one of the things about at that time, there was a bit of a reluctance to call upon D11 to handle the firearms incidents, but gradually that started to change, and they started to develop a lot of things, tactics and so on, and he was sent to Hereford, where the team was, and they trained with the regiment, and it's very interesting because he was taken up in a helicopter with an abseil harness, and off you go over the side. He never abseiled before. Introduction to abseiling was get out of the heli, and there was by no means the crawl, walk, run approach that we're kind of used to. While at Hereford, they shot in the CQB house and so on, and then went up to Scotland to do an exercise, a terrorism exercise with the regiment. Came afoul of the Scottish police. A senior officer up there asked them where the firearm certificates were, and disarmed them. So they kind of ran around this exercise with no weapons at all. So one of the things while he was with Blue Team, and I'll quote this directly, I introduced practical pistol shoots into our training regime. These were based on the type of competitions that some of us were taking part in, and combined speed, agility, slick weapons handling and fast, accurate shooting. They were completely unlike the standard accuracy-based shoots that the lads were used to, and brought out everybody's competitive nature. Soon standards started to soar. Excuse me. This came into good effect with a major incident. They were involved in lots of things. The Libyan embassy siege, where Police Constable Yvonne Fletcher was murdered by the Libyans, who escaped under diplomatic immunity. Things like that went on. But then came the North Hole siege, where a man called Errol Walker murdered his former partner, and took her daughter, Carleen, who was age 4, hostage. This went on, it started on Boxing Day, and it went on for a couple of days. And then it was resolved when he came out onto the balcony, and there was a discarded riot shield there that some other police had left, and he took it as opportunity to grab it. Meanwhile, a couple of the armed police came out from one side of the balcony to try to intercept him. He managed to throw the shield at them and get back inside, and they saw him grab a knife, and he was starting to attack Carleen. They decided to make an assault. They used a stun, or a couple of stuns, and Tony went in through the window, which was barricaded, into a darkened room. Didn't have a flashlight available. It was under his outer clothing, and with a revolver solved the hostage problem. And the child thankfully survived, and the Errol Walker was severely wounded and disabled, but survived as well. The aftermath was that it was always understood that anybody who was involved in a live shooting would probably have to leave the unit, and he did come under a great deal of pressure, particularly from Inspector Mike, who during the siege was on the radio giving wrong information, and thought that the team deliberately contradicted his orders and made the assault, disregarding the fact that they saved a child. And throughout Tony's career, this Inspector Mike did kind of prove to be a bit of a thorn in the side. Another thing that Tony says, he is sent to America for rest and recuperation at one stage, and he says every worthwhile piece of material on the police use of firearms came out of the States. He's strongly of the opinion to learn from them, and this was was contrary to a D11 opinion. They sent a firearms instructor over to the FBI, and he came back and said they've got nothing to teach us. So again, that sort of set in the past mentality. D11 became PT17, and the next major incident that Tony's involved with was a stakeout of a coming armed robbery. The regional crime squad had good information that a gang was going to rob a security vehicle, cash in transit, that was delivering wages to an abattoir. They staked it out. Tony saw the robbers make their move. He jumps out. He's holding a ballistic shield in one hand and a Browning 9mm in the other. Comes around the corner and is confronted by 3 armed robbers holding a security guard hostage. One had a Smith & Wesson Magnum revolver, one had a Browning automatic shotgun, and one had a Spaz automatic or semi-automatic shotgun. And he fired double tap, single, all hits, and solved the problem. He killed 2 of the robbers, and one survived with a torso hit. and that was a very, very significant shoot in the annals of PT-17. He goes on to, oh, by the way, Masad Ayub wrote about that particular incident in his series on in the Ayub files in one of the magazines, and he said it was a feat of arms which rivaled any in the history of American policing. So obviously it was very significant. He then talks about operating during the terrorism campaigns, the 7/7, the aftermath of that. He was liaising with special forces during that, and then the Stockwell shooting in the subway. How that went down. He wasn't involved. I'll say he was doing a liaison job, but it was his former team members. And then we come to Operation Tayport, which was towards the end of his career, and he was involved in supporting the surveillance unit who were following some armed robbers, and they developed a tactic which is called MASTS, Mobile Armed Support to Surveillance, which is usually colloquially known as hard stop, or a forced vehicle intercept, which the surveillance follow the bad guys until either they've gathered sufficient evidence or it's obvious that they're going to commit some violent act, and the firearms team in a series of cars is called forward. They got this blocking procedure, and the idea is to dominate the guys in the car. Tony was in the second vehicle. He was armed with a 53 Heckler long gun, and he's acting as static cover. He sees Azelle Rodney, who's one of the bad guys, who, by the way, were on the way to murder some Colombian drug dealers and steal their loot. Make a very, very suspicious move. He was very, very surveillance aware, and Tony decided he needed to be shot, did so, and that sparked off a whole series of events, inquests, inquiries and so on, which it's all gone into detail in the book, and you know, I think the reasonable reader will come to the same conclusion I did, that he was made a scapegoat by the system, and he was eventually put on trial, one of very, very few armed police officers ever to actually be accused, and long, lengthy process, evidence given by experts from other forces and so on, but he was able to present the case himself very, very articulately, because he was so highly experienced in firearms and also in the law, because they were updated on that all the time, and he was acquitted, and rightly so. Another little incident is where a senior female officer is introduced to him and says she'd always wanted to meet the Met's own serial killer, and he got an apology and some compensation out of that. Talks about transitioning into civilian careers and so on. As I said in the introduction, it's certainly one of the most interesting and action-filled books. It certainly rivals the memoirs of police officers from any force in the world, and full of police humour, full of tactics and options and so on, and really, really a major book on the subject.